Item 5, public hearings, appeals, presentations. We have presentation, discussion, and possible acceptance of the Broken Arrow Citizen Recycle Committee report. We have, okay, Lee's going to do it. Lee Zerk. Okay.
Good evening, Lee Zerk, General Services Director. In the spring of 2016, the City Council authorized a survey to understand the opinions of refuse customers to serve as a guide in the development and decision-making process of the future refuse and recycling services. And in August 2016, the survey was presented to the Broken Arrow Municipal Authority. As a result of that survey, the city manager recommended that a committee be put together to study refuse and recycling in Broken Arrow. As a result of that survey tonight, I'd like to introduce Mr. Peterson and the chairman of the committee, and Kate Vasquez, the senior consultant for GBB, which was assisting the committee, and talk to you about the committee's actions and their potential recommendations. Mr. Peterson?
Russell Peterson. I'm chairman of the Recycling Committee for the City of Broken Arrow. Before I make my presentation, I just want to say one thing. I am so excited about some of your agenda items showing these economic development opportunities, and I want to commend the city and the chamber and the EDC for all the level of cooperation that obviously was necessary to get that done. I've been looking for that for 35 years, and I think we are there. And I really appreciate you guys for all the effort you have been doing on that. The recycling committee started about 9 months ago, and I'm not going to take a lot of time on this, but essentially I'm going to ask the committee members that are present to stand. We met approximately 2 times a month with this 9-month period, and we essentially started out with tours of the existing facilities in our area. We went to the MET, the Covanta Energy Plant, and the MRF, and then off of that started an educational process to get us up to speed. We determined what are recyclable types of items and what was not recyclable, and then we also talked about the economic impact of those recyclables. A lot of us hadn't understood that if we have tons of recycling go through a plant, that is a commodity that is valuable, that offsets some of the cost of doing the recycling. Early on, we reached a consensus that the city should consider a curbside recycling program. And we're asking for your consideration on that in our report. The report will be, the nuts and bolts of it, Kate will do here in just a little bit. After we reached that consensus, we looked at what kind of program that we might have in the future. And we looked at bags, we looked at carts, we looked at combinations of those things. And after careful consideration, we have a recommendation for you at this time. We would ask that BAMA set up a 4-month pilot project that would involve a designated area in our town that the city would determine. The program would involve placing 1 cart for recyclables, 1 cart for garbage or refuse, and this would involve essentially a once-a-week pickup and elimination of the free bag program. The economics of that basically are neutral, as will be explained in our report. After the pilot has been done, we would urge that a scientific survey be done with the citizens that were affected in the area, determine their input into that procedure. Staff and this committee look at that, and then make a final recommendation to this body. Some of the things that are going to be in our report involve change, some maybe semi-radical changes, and as we know, a lot of change in any situation sometimes can be opposed by some people. However, we do believe that progress is another word for change, and we would ask you to carefully look at this and take it into consideration. I'm going to close. There's a quote in the recent Wonder Woman movie that says if you see something wrong in your world or community, you can do something or nothing. And we've already tried nothing. So we ask you to try something along this area. And at this time, I'll turn over to Kate.
Hello, good evening. It's so great to be back with you guys again here in beautiful Broken Arrow. I'm happy to share the report of the Recycling Committee. Our firm GBB has been staffing this committee since it's been meeting over the past several months, as Mr. Peterson described. I've just prepared a couple of slides that highlight the work of the committee and its results. There's me, but we've met before. The committee, I wanted to recap again, as Mr. Peterson did, the amount of work that they did. This was a dedicated, hard-working committee. There were no preconceived conclusions. They gave a lot of their time, and we work with a lot of committees, and this is one of the most effective, dedicated groups, I say without reservation, that I see doing this kind of work. I just wanted to share, this is the presentations and field trips that they went on to make sure that they understood all of the subject matter information that they were considering in the course of their work. One of the tasks on this project that was information for the committee was a cost model conducted by Gershwin, Brickner, and Bratton, the firm I work for. This was, we were asked to provide cost modeling on one possibility and a variation thereupon. In this instance, we cost modeled a typical two-cart system with which many people are familiar with, where you have a cart for garbage and a cart for recycling. It's picked up once a week, both on the same day. And then a variation on that whereby the garbage would still be allowed to be set out in bags on the ground, which would require the purchase of fewer carts, which is a capital cost. So you can see in the red-ish rusty color that this is based on FY16 actual. Please note that this is not a rate model. This is a cost model. Rates are often influenced by other various factors that weren't captured in this cost model. These costs in this model, we are very confident in everything that we inputted, and anything that could not be sourced with that level of certainty was left out of the model. So, and I will talk about that in just a moment. But so just for comparison, FY16 actual, this is the 1359 you see is what came out of the model. And that program is funded on break even, so clearly you can see how it didn't have every single cost in it. Scenario 1 with the 2 carts and scenario 2 with the 1 cart and the bags on the ground, you'll see 3 different outputs: high, low, and typical. That has to do with the price of processing the recyclables at the material recovery facility. At present, City of Tulsa enjoys a very well-negotiated rate for processing their recyclables, and a revenue sharing agreement, which GBB finds to be typical and very good in the interest of the city. That is what you see for the low, as in the low price for the processing. The price you see for high is for high price processing. And for this version, we used the price that was previously quoted a few years ago by the material recovery facility to City of Broken Arrow for a pilot project. This would be considered a ceiling price. It has to be expensive due to the nature of a pilot project, a temporary effort. The third number you see there, typical, is a rate that GBB would, if we were procuring on your behalf, we would hope to negotiate that or better with the materials recovery facility based on what we know they charge Tulsa and what we know similar facilities charge other cities across the U.S. So the number you see there next to typical is what would be associated with a processing cost of about $60 a ton. compared to Tulsa currently enjoys 40. Are there any questions about the cost model? I'll just pause for a moment. Okay. I want to be sure to caution that these results aren't interpreted as recycling could quote-unquote save money, because there are costs we know that the city is going to have in the near future that we could not put into this cost model. Most specifically and significantly is any new GPS-based equipment for the trucks would affect the operating cost per mile of those vehicles. For this cost model, we used lifetime to date for your trucks. City keeps excellent records, and it worked into the model very well, but we would expect that number to change because there's going to be new equipment, there's support of the equipment, et cetera. So I've talked about those first two things here, the caveats on the cost model already. The third one is recycling performance between scenario 1 and scenario 2. As a reminder, scenario 1 is the 2-cart system, and scenario 2 is the 1-cart system. In the absence of any real field information to compare it to, the conservative position was to assume that the two programs would perform similarly, i.e. people would divert the same amounts of material in both kinds of programs and the quality of the material would be the same. However, I don't have any programs I can compare to estimate what the diversion might be different between the two. We were able to only identify one city that currently has that method, and at the risk of disparaging the folks that live in that town, it was not a benchmark level program. Their recycling rate they report to their state is 12%, which is not a benchmark or gold standard performance. Key influences on the costs. Why did they work out the way that they did? And it can really come to 4 things. And the most important is reducing the collection frequency to 1 day per week. With the use of carts for sanitation purposes, once a week is safe and clean, and the capacity is adequate to store the material, strictly from a sanitation and operational perspective. That also allows you to use your current fleet without needing to purchase many additional trucks, perhaps none at all. The introduction of computerized routing also would let you use your current fleet to do a once-a-week collection of the 2 different streams, 2 passes on the same day. And it makes the routes more efficient, it makes them more balanced, and it lets the trucks and the drivers be utilized in the most efficient manner. Third, as Mr. Peterson mentioned, is the removal of the bag expense. The bags currently, I think the budget line item for this year is $518,000. That number increases every year. It's expected to continue to increase. It's not only directly tied to how many households there are, but it is an item that just goes up every year. And then the third thing is recyclables revenue sharing. At present, revenue sharing is strong in the U.S. You have very good access to markets here in this part of Oklahoma. I would expect you to be able to negotiate a revenue sharing agreement similar to what City of Tulsa, but also other cities of clients of GBBs that we have recently seen, that we have recently helped clients procure, with that sort of revenue sharing, making your net cost per ton similar in cost to you as disposal, ideally even better, but at least similar, so that you don't pay more for recycling per ton than you would to go to the burn plant in Tulsa. We've talked about the recommendations a little bit. I just went ahead and put these in here, talking about the free bags and their distribution. There are some matters about the bags other than just the cost that what they cost to buy. It's possible that not having a cart at the curb will reduce the benefit of a GPS-based tracking system, not knowing exactly what system the city is going to purchase, but many of these systems rely on being able to read a chip or take an address point, and there is no such thing on a bag. Also, the opaque bags and the general set-out allowance may not be encouraging participation in recycling. Once weekly collection, recognizing that that is the tradition in Broken Arrow to have twice weekly. It is, with the advent of single stream recycling and the use of rolling carts, the database that GBB currently maintains of cities and counties with 100,000 or more residents, fewer than 10% of those communities have twice weekly collection. Most places where we have seen twice weekly collection, it's a private effort by the part of the residents, for example, in an HOA that has private sector collection. Also, best practice shows that refuse and recycling should be collected on the same day to encourage better participation. Mr. Peterson talked about the use of the carts for the recyclables. This is the best practice currently in the U.S. to provide enough capacity so that residents don't run out of space or don't feel like they have, by separating their material into two streams, they have a bunch of stuff all over their house, to use colloquial language. The carts encourage people to store it up till it suits their needs. Some families will put it out every week, some families will put it out every other week. Also, if you miss your collection day, you have storage capacity. And then the fourth recommendation about the pilot project. There would be 2 pilot areas, one for each suggested methodology. In both, the collection would be on the same day, once a week, and in both, there would be no additional distribution of, it would be testing the use of the bags, but obviously these residents would still have bags saved up. So it's an approximation of what the new system would be like, but it would still permit in the scenario 2 for bags to be on the ground. GBB was asked to prepare some cost information about what a pilot project might cost to run. There are 2 columns here, one for scenario 1, which is the two-cart scenario, and one is for scenario 2. I'm sorry that these are a little small to read. For 1 and 2. The second column is for 1 and 2, scenario 1 and 2. And I need to point out that some additional information became available since your report was printed. It's a minor point, but it bears noting since this is in the report as it was printed. The retrofit of the collection trucks had been estimated at approximately $5,000 per truck. It is in actuality $10,000 per truck. This is some new quote information that came in from the vendor. So I just wanted to point out that your report shows $15,000 for the one study and $35,000 for the two studies on the line there where it's highlighted, and those are the actual estimated values, 30 and 70, excuse me. So twice as much on the truck conversion cost. There are a few costs that aren't on this estimate also. There would be some internal city expenses. Perhaps fuel is more. Perhaps there's costs associated with using the onboard computer equipment on the trucks, which is effort that is underway. We understand is going to happen independent of this. And again, not knowing what those were, the conservative position was to leave them out and note that. I'm happy to take any other questions.
Any questions for Kate?
I think you noted in the report that glass would not be a part of the recyclables. Is that correct?
We would suggest that since you're starting from scratch, that you not take glass in the single stream program. Glass has many operational problems at the material recovery facility, which largely serve to wear out the equipment prematurely, reduce the value of the other recyclables, and much glass that goes into a material recovery facility is not recycled into new products. It is used for beneficial reuse. For example, cover for landfill in the place of gravel for different uses, et cetera. But it is not manufactured into new bottles or new things like that. When you can collect glass separately, your entire recycling program is actually improved overall. The glass that people do bring to that program does get recycled. And there's research about several cities there in the report about that. In addition, the overall quality of your other materials should be better, which if I were helping you with the contract, I would mention that to the material recovery facility, that you were not going to have glass as a program material. You have an excellent opportunity with the Met in town, with an established, well-known, and used recycling drop-off center, where they might collect the glass in it as its own stream and actually get some value for it. Whereas at present, glass is, quote-unquote, a loser. It does not pay. The material recovery facility has to pay to get rid of it, and you would not be paid anything for it, but you would pay to have it processed. So every ton of glass you sent in, you'd be paying to have it processed, but you would not be getting any revenue for it.
Well, and Mike, I had the opportunity to go to the MRF when we went there, and I believe that the statement was there that they didn't want glass. The MRF did not want glass.
Yeah.
Well, and I can tell you with my work on the Met, that glass just is not an income producer for that.
Mixed in the single stream?
Exactly. So being able to divide it can yield some profit, but in the mixed stream, it doesn't.
Correct.
I had a couple of questions that some people had asked me. Some garages don't have room to hold 2 cans, or will we have to set some kind of ordinance of where your trash cans could be held, like when they're not on the street?
Most localities do have something like that. Sometimes there's screening laws that require it not to be visible from the front or from the side. Sometimes they have to do with what hours the cans can be at the curb. And then beyond that, as long as it's put away, then it doesn't have to necessarily be inside a structure, for example, a garage.
Sure.
There are many different ways to write that. That is a concern, namely because you don't want people leaving it at the curb all the time. It
Right.
invites dumping, they blow over, they get knocked over, et cetera.
Sure.
There are any number of ways that that can be addressed.
And then we'll have to make sure, the education of it all and just letting everyone know that part of it. And then if we go down to 1 day, obviously, I can fill up in my 2 days, a pickup. I've got trash out there, several bags. Do they pick up the trash, the extra bags as well? Because I'll have twice as much on 1 day. And then will that eliminate employee jobs, since we're only 1 day a week instead of 2 days a week?
The staffing question, we did not have any change in the level of trucks, which would indicate that you would still have the same number of drivers.
Okay.
It's not less or more, it's differently allocated.
Okay.
And then your other question about capacity. In other cities, often to help people accommodate the capacity, to make sure they have enough, they will allow residents to have more than 1 cart for an additional surcharge, whether they want it to be a recycling cart or a trash cart. I'm not speaking from anything that we've talked about on the committee or that I've talked about with staff. This is just as an example.
Sure.
It's usually a few dollars, and it's to make sure that there's enough, that everything is contained. As far as extra bags, that would be something else that you would have to discuss in the process of implementation. Some cities allow extra bags, some don't. If you decided not to, that would be in a situation where the vehicles that are used can't operate in that way. If you're going to continue to use manual loading, you may want to consider allowing a certain number of bags or pursuing the additional cart route.
I do know that from my perspective, and Scott and I were on that committee. When we started recycling several years ago, my wife and I, we probably decreased the amount of trash by 65% that we actually having them pick up now because we recycle. We take it to the Met every week and a half. Take it. So it's decreased. Maybe to go along with the answer to your question, if you do recycle, and I think that the committee and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but if I've got this right, and where we took it from the beginning, the recycling will be volunteer. I mean, if you don't want to do it, you can actually opt out of recycling. That came down from the council from the very beginning. But so you're going to have more trash if you do that. But those that recycle are going to have a lot less trash to pick up. And the trash will be picked up, both of them will be picked up on the same day, which I was kind of surprised, but as they shared is that people start mixing their trash more if they don't do that. So if you do recycle, you're going to have a lot more trash. If you don't recycle, then you're going to have more trash on one day, right?
Well, and I agree with Johnny. I started recycling about 10 years ago and paid for a curbside service that we have here in Broken Arrow. And I've found that about 60%, about the same. I have 60% less trash going out. There's a lot of days on Thursday, I don't put out a bag, or I usually just have 1 or 2 bags now, where used to I just had a lot of bags out every day. So it does make a difference. And I think that some people probably find that they'll maybe want an extra recycling cart if they're filling them up, but it does really make a big difference. I think having 2 96-gallon carts is quite a bit, but there are some days when if you clean your house or something, you may have an extra cart, so we'll have to look at how we address that. But
It's going to be it's going to be a change, and we have such a good trash system now. They do such a good job with it. But if you look through the information from the committee, you'll see the workman's comp problem with picking up. Being a council, I know you guys study and look into different things. Look into how many cities across the state that do have individual pickup of bags, and it just doesn't happen. I was in Nowata a few months ago with my students doing some volunteer work, and they had 2 trash trucks, and both of them were automatic, and they were the 112th or 113th largest city in the state. So they're a very small city, but yet they still have the automation on that. So it is going to be a transition. What's really nice is to take a bag out and it's out of mind, out of sight. You're spending $500,000 a year just on trash bags that's going to be in a dump that's not going to, it just doesn't deteriorate. So I think it's going to give those that want to recycle an opportunity. And the carts are used, on vacation. I've looked at cities and you'll see them. Most ordinances I've seen and looked at, they didn't let them leave the cart out. And you know what I mean, that evening the carts had to be put back up. And one deal that I looked at individually was that of the top 10 cities in the state, we're the only ones that don't have automation in our trash pickup system. So Broken Arrow might have a system that they like because it's just out of sight, but it's behind the times, workman's comp wise, ecology wise, and so I think it's something that we look at. The recommendation from the committee, which a lot of the members, most of the members are here, as we saw a while ago, is that we have 2 pilot programs, one with the cart and a bag. We don't furnish the bag. The other one with the 2 carts, and then get feedback from those 2 systems. So I will say that Michelle Bergwell with the school system made a suggestion, and I think we're going to give this to staff. I'm hoping to look at it and get back with us, is that they pick a couple of schools for that to help centralize it, the different areas that they're going to run the pilot programs, and that way one thing to look at is getting information out, and the kids in those school districts really get involved with that and encourage parents. So the city manager can get with Michelle, would help circulate that. But I'm looking forward to getting that information. I have no problem with going to the 1 day of pickup. I don't see much. Look at your subdivisions, how many's picked up that second day.
And I think our biggest challenge that we have with change is the fact that we've done such a great job for so many years.
No,
And so it's hard to change. It's
right.
but I do think I am excited about seeing the pilot programs implemented and an opportunity to see what the surveys come back. And I think that a lot of people will appreciate the change once it's happened.
Take note of your subdivision, just a final comment, take note of your subdivision on the pickup days and see how many people already use carts. It's in excess of 50% in my subdivision. They use the cart, put the stuff in the bag, take a cart out just to protect the trash when they're out. So they're already using carts.
Well, I was the city council alternate on the committee, so I didn't get to vote, but I sure got to give my 2 cents worth. But I think the key issue, and I know the mayor and Councilman Parks alluded to this, is we're looking at pilot programs so that we can determine what is the best practice and what would be best here. It also gives us an opportunity to collect that data, as I understand, to determine is a change appropriate. If it is, as opposed to this wholesale, forcing everyone to do something. That's certainly not our heart. We want to see what works, and I think that's the recommendation is let's try it in localized areas and see what works, and then we can come back and take the data and figure out where we go next.
Well, and what's really important is this is a community and a citizens committee that brought this recommendation, and I think that's paramount to what we do here is let the citizens come together and make these recommendations. So I think I'm looking forward to it.
Mayor, I have just one question. Kate, with regard to the pilot program with the 2 carts and the 1 day per week, did the committee talk about offering different size carts for trash for folks, or is that something that was going to be discussed if council accepts the recommendation?
Different rates.
The different carts, like if the size carts, like you can get the 90 gallons, there's also smaller ones. So as a part of the pilot, offering 1 or 2 sizes or 3 sizes to folks?
The committee set aside discussing different sized carts because the survey last year indicated that there was not a strong interest in pay-as-you-throw, a different rate for different size carts. For this project, we have talked throughout with about 64-gallon carts, but then 96 gallons were just mentioned. The biggest difference between using one or the other would be some cost. The larger ones cost a little more, but you're going to amortize it. And of course, they're larger to store. They do have a larger footprint. Any cart smaller than that presents some challenges. We have seen a lot recently in other cities where people sized down to a 32-gallon cart, which for reference, that is about the size of the recycling bin you might be familiar with from other cities. That's 32 gallons. And then having a very large recycling cart, which are generally offered at a lower price, and then just contaminating it. We've seen communities with 25 to 35% contamination when they have implemented a program like that. It's not to say that it can't work, but we're starting to think that a 32-gallon, which would be the next size down, for garbage, has some challenges that should maybe be considered very carefully. I would suggest that in implementing this program, you would do 64 or 96-gallon carts, the same for each type. And then if you want to look at allowing people to choose one or the other, that is, there's an administrative level, and there are costs associated with that. Servicing them should be no real difference. It would be the capital cost.
Okay.
But the committee specifically did not discuss that.
Okay.
Well, I really want to take a second to thank everyone that was involved. The committee, to just have 13 meetings and take time out of your day and spend the time and the energy that it took to discuss this issue and to learn about it, and the education that you got and then taking that information and passing it on into a report to us. We really appreciate that. I appreciate Johnny and Scott going to 13 more meetings, and definitely appreciate your time. And Kate, appreciate GBB putting this together for us. I don't know if we have any more discussion. I know that you know, the request is to accept this report and have staff give some more work to staff.
Actually, I will say, Mayor, members of the, actually, authority members, should council choose to accept it, I mean, obviously, the members of the committee and the community is going to know what the next steps are. And so the next steps after acceptance would be for the administration to sit down and to look at the two options that have been presented for pilots specifically and determine, like Kate said tonight, that a lot of the costs are outlined, but we need to get those costs, all of those costs listed, so we'll know what we're talking about, and then actually schedule a time with the authority to come back and make a recommendation to you based on the report from the committee, and then based on the action that you take with regard to the administration's recommendation, and then we would implement one or both of the pilot programs that the council choose. And then we would be prepared to talk about the implementation plan in terms of the public education to our customers, the school districts, and then we would have a series of public meetings in the areas that would be designated for the pilot program. Probably, I would say, at least 2, if not 3 meetings. That may not be necessary, but we would certainly do whatever we need to do to invite all those folks that are going to be asked to participate, so they know exactly what's going to be asked of them as a part of a pilot program. And then we would pick a start date, and then we would go forward from there.
Any more questions or discussion of authority?
So we need to accept the report.
I'll make a motion, we accept the report.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Wimpy,
Yes.
Parks,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Udi,
Yes.
Thurman.
Yes. Again, I thank everybody involved for all the time they put into this.
And I believe that they will get that, after we're finished with those pilot programs, then this committee will meet back and also view that.
Go over the
again.
survey
So,
and-
appreciate it. And great time as far as, there wasn't very many times that we didn't have nearly 100%, maybe 80% participation.
That's great.
So they were there on time.
Mr. Parks, whatever council decides, we will continue to invite them to those public meetings and the pilot programs. I mean, they did a lot of work, and so therefore, I believe their role should continue, should
Good.
they choose to be a part of that.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
and I would also say Kate has done a great job of helping steer us, and a lot of good work, so thank you.
Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you some more.
Thank you.